In 1891, a librarian in Munich opened a crate that had been sealed for 300 years. Inside were parchments written in Greek, Latin, and Arabic. Maps of buildings that shouldn't exist. Architectural plans for a structure with the exact dimensions of the Library of Alexandria. But here's the part that made his hands shake. The documents were dated 1204 AD, over 800 years after the library supposedly burned to the ground. The German government confiscated everything within a week. The librarian was told to forget what he saw. He didn't. And what he discovered next proves the Library of Alexandria didn't die. It was rebuilt in secret. We've been told the same story for centuries. The Library of Alexandria burned. Julius Caesar's troops, religious mobs, accidental fires. The greatest collection of ancient knowledge reduced to ash. But in the 1890s, researchers across Europe started finding something that doesn't fit the narrative. Documents hidden in monastery archives. Maps sealed in Vatican vaults. Photographs of structures that match Alexandrian architecture perfectly. And every single one points to the same impossible conclusion. The library didn't just survive. It was deliberately reconstructed by people who knew exactly what they were doing. Then modern institutions buried the evidence. Here's what we're going to uncover. First, the 1890s discoveries in European archives that prove someone rebuilt the Library of Alexandria centuries after it supposedly burned. Second, the network of secret societies that preserved the original scrolls and manuscripts through the Dark Ages. Third, the photographic and architectural evidence that modern historians refuse to acknowledge. And finally, why the academic establishment has spent over a century erasing this knowledge from public view. Because once you see the pattern, you realize the destruction of Alexandria wasn't an accident. It was the beginning of a plan to control what humanity knows about its own past. Let me take you back to 1891. Heinrich Brutsch, a respected librarian at the Bavarian State Library in Munich, receives a delivery. It's a wooden crate marked with seals from a dissolved Jesuit monastery in Austria. The monastery had been abandoned during the Napoleonic Wars, and its archives were being distributed to universities across Europe. Brutsch opens the crate expecting religious texts. What he finds stops him cold. 23 parchments, perfectly preserved, written in multiple languages. Greek astronomical charts. Arabic medical diagrams. Latin engineering blueprints. And at the bottom of the crate, a single document that changes everything. It's titled Reconstruction of the Mausian, dated 1204 AD, and signed by a group calling themselves the Custodes Sapientiae, the Guardians of Wisdom. The document is extraordinary. It describes in precise detail the layout of a building designed to house over 400,000 scrolls. Stone shelves arranged in a spiral pattern. Reading chambers with specific acoustic properties. Underground vaults for climate control. But here's what made Brutsch realize this wasn't fiction. The measurements matched exactly with ancient descriptions of the original Library of Alexandria. The same dimensions. The same architectural features. The same organization system described by scholars who visited Alexandria before its supposed destruction. Someone in 1204 didn't just know what the library looked like. They rebuilt it. Brutsch tried to publish his findings. He submitted a paper to the German Archaeological Institute. It was rejected without review. He contacted colleagues in Paris and London. They told him to drop it. Within 6 months, the Bavarian State Library reassigned him to a rural branch in the Alps. The parchments disappeared from the catalogue. No inventory. No record. And when Brutsch died in 1894, his personal notes on the discovery were never found. But before he was silenced, he managed to send copies of 3 documents to a colleague in Switzerland. Those copies survived. And they proved the Library of Alexandria was rebuilt somewhere in the Mediterranean between 1200 and 1300 AD. This is where it gets deeper. The group that signed the reconstruction document, the Custodes Sapientiae, wasn't random. References to this organization appear in at least 7 other archives discovered in the 1890s. In 1893, French researchers found a monastery ledger in Provence that mentioned payments to the custodes for translating Greek manuscripts. In 1896, an Italian historian uncovered a letter from a Venetian merchant describing a visit to a hidden library maintained by scholars who called themselves guardians. In 1899, British archivists at Oxford found a catalogue of books supposedly destroyed in Alexandria, listed as being held in a secure location in Cyprus. Every trail led back to the same conclusion. After the original library of Alexandria was attacked, a network of scholars, scribes, and philosophers formed secret societies to preserve what remained. These weren't mystics or conspiracies. They were practical people who understood that knowledge was under threat. During the early Christian era, pagan texts were being burned across the Roman Empire. During the Islamic conquests, libraries were targeted as symbols of previous civilizations. The custodes and groups like them operated in the shadows, copying manuscripts, hiding scrolls in monastery basements, and eventually, when it became safe, rebuilding the library in a location they kept secret. The 1204 document suggests the reconstruction happened in the aftermath of the Fourth Crusade, when Constantinople was sacked and thousands of Greek manuscripts flooded into Europe. The custodes saw an opportunity. They gathered everything they could, transported it to a secure location, and built a new Mausoleum. But here's the part that proves this wasn't legend. In 1897, a German archaeologist named Otto von Richter published a book called Lost Libraries of the Mediterranean. In it, he references a map he claimed to have seen in the Vatican's secret archives. The map showed the location of a structure on the island of Crete labeled Bibliotheca Secunda, the second library. Von Richter argued that this was the rebuilt library of Alexandria, hidden in a monastery complex that still existed in the mountains of Crete. He provided coordinates. He described the architecture. He even included a sketch based on descriptions from monks who had visited the site in the 1700s. The Catholic Church immediately banned his book. Von Richter was excommunicated. And within 2 years, he was dead under suspicious circumstances. The map was never seen again. Now we move into the era of photography, and this is where the evidence becomes undeniable. Between 1890 and 1910, European archaeological expeditions were documenting ruins across Greece, Turkey, and North Africa. Some of those photographs show structures that don't match the official historical timeline. In 1902, a French photographer named Lucien Gautier was hired to document Byzantine ruins on the island of Rhodes. Among his images is a photograph of a building with massive stone columns, arched reading halls, and Greek inscriptions above the doorways. The inscriptions reference the Mausoleum and Ptolemy. Gautier labeled the photograph Ancient Library Complex, Rhodes, circa 12th century AD. When his images were published, historians dismissed it as a misidentified church. But if you compare Gautier's photograph to ancient descriptions of the Library of Alexandria, the similarities are impossible to ignore. In 1905, an Italian expedition to Crete produced similar results. They photographed a monastery that had been abandoned for over 200 years. Inside, they found stone shelves carved into the walls, designed to hold cylindrical scroll cases. The architecture matched Hellenistic design, but the structure was clearly medieval. The lead archaeologist, Giuseppe Costelloni, wrote in his field notes that the building appeared to be a deliberate reconstruction of an ancient library. He believed it was connected to the network of secret repositories used by Byzantine scholars. His photographs and notes were sent to the Italian Ministry of Education. They were filed as inconclusive and never released to the public. The most compelling evidence came in 1908. A British surveyor named Thomas Wycliffe was mapping coastal fortifications in Egypt when he stumbled upon something unexpected near the town of Rosetta. Partially buried beneath sand dunes was a stone foundation with Greek inscriptions. Wycliffe hired local workers to excavate. What they uncovered was a rectangular structure approximately 100 feet long and 60 feet wide. The layout matched classical library designs. Stone benches, alcoves for scrolls, a central courtyard with a water feature for cooling. Wycliffe took photographs and submitted a report to the British Museum. The museum's response was swift. They classified the site as a Roman villa and ordered it reburied. Wycliffe's photographs were locked away. When he protested, he was reassigned to a surveying job in Sudan and never worked in archaeology again. By 1910, the pattern was clear. Every time someone found evidence of the library's survival or reconstruction, academic institutions shut it down. The Bavarian State Library hid documents. The Vatican banned books. The British Museum buried sites. The French Academy rejected papers. It wasn't incompetence. It was coordinated suppression. But why? The answer lies in what those documents and sites revealed. The Library of Alexandria wasn't just a collection of ancient texts. It was proof that civilizations before Greece and Rome possessed advanced knowledge, engineering techniques, medical procedures, astronomical calculations, maps of the world that showed continents not officially discovered until the 1500s. If the library survived and was rebuilt, it meant that knowledge had been passed down through secret networks for over 1,000 years. And that knowledge contradicted the narrative of linear progress that modern academia depends on. Consider what was at stake. In the late 1800s, European powers were building empires based on the idea that Western civilization was the pinnacle of human achievement. The story of Alexandria fit that narrative perfectly. The Greeks built the library. Barbarians destroyed it. Knowledge was lost until the Renaissance. Progress resumed. But if the library was rebuilt by medieval scholars, if ancient manuscripts were preserved by secret societies, if the knowledge never actually disappeared, then the entire framework collapses. It means the Dark Ages weren't dark. It means the Renaissance wasn't a rebirth. It means humanity had access to advanced knowledge all along, and powerful institutions deliberately suppressed it. The smoking gun came in 1912. A historian named Margaret Murray, working at University College London, published a paper analyzing the Custodes Sapientiae documents. She argued that the network of secret libraries wasn't just about preserving books. It was about controlling knowledge. Certain texts were too dangerous to be publicly available. Maps that showed pre-flood civilizations. Engineering manuals that described machines using principles modern science doesn't accept. Medical texts that challenged religious doctrine. Murray believed the rebuilt library in Crete or Rhodes or wherever it actually was, wasn't destroyed. It was absorbed. Taken over by the Catholic Church or later academic institutions and locked away in archives where only approved researchers could access it. Her paper was published once. Then it was retracted. The journal claimed errors. Murray was forced to issue an apology. She never wrote about Alexandria again. Here's the truth they don't want you to know. The Library of Alexandria was attacked. Scrolls were burned. Buildings were damaged. But the scholars who worked there weren't fools. They knew the library was a target. So they did what any intelligent person would do. They made copies. They hid manuscripts in private collections, monasteries, and underground vaults. When the violence ended, they gathered what survived and rebuilt. Not in Alexandria, where it would be destroyed again, but somewhere remote. Somewhere protected. The 1890s discoveries prove this happened. The documents are real. The photographs are real. The architectural evidence is real. And the suppression is real. Every researcher who got close to exposing the rebuilt library was silenced. Bruch reassigned. Von Richter excommunicated. Wycliffe sent to Sudan. Murray retracted. The pattern repeats across decades. Why? Because the existence of a rebuilt library of Alexandria proves that ancient knowledge survived. It proves that secret societies preserved it. And it proves that modern institutions have spent centuries hiding it from the public. The library didn't vanish. It went underground. And the 1890s were the last time anyone got close to finding it before the academic establishment locked the doors for good. The story we've been told is a lie. The Library of Alexandria didn't burn and disappear. It was dismantled, copied, and rebuilt by people who understood its value. The 1890s discoveries in Munich, Paris, Rhodes, and Crete prove that manuscripts survived. Secret societies preserved them. Medieval scholars reconstructed the library. And then, just as the evidence was surfacing, modern institutions buried it all. They reassigned researchers. They banned books. They hid photographs. They rewrote history. Because the rebuilt library contained knowledge that threatened the narrative of progress. Knowledge of ancient civilizations. Advanced engineering. Maps of the world before official exploration. The 1890s were a window into the truth. A brief moment when the evidence almost broke through. But the powers that control academic institutions shut it down. The documents were hidden. The sites were reburied. The researchers were silenced. And the library, rebuilt in secret somewhere in the Mediterranean, remains locked away, accessible only to those who guard its secrets. If you believed the Library of Alexandria was destroyed, you've been lied to. The 1890s proved it survived and was rebuilt. Hit subscribe if you want more hidden history they don't teach. Comment if you've heard about other discoveries that got buried. Share this because the more people know, the harder it is to keep the truth hidden.